Hi, my name is Shaun Newman and I serve on the senior leadership team here at Image, and this is Image Reflects, our midweek video series where we reflect on the sermon this week and go deeper into God's Word. This week, Pastor Chris quoted a famous verse from Paul in Philippians 1:21, "For to me to live is Christ and to die is gain." Clearly, Paul is one of the greatest biblical examples of faith in the face of fear, and this passage may be his most powerful testimony of this fact. Paul is proclaiming boldly that in spite of fear, in spite of his circumstance, he's going to continue living the life fulfilled through the mission he's been called to. In reading such a profound statement, we can oftentimes compare our lives of faith to someone like Paul and even become discouraged. But I want you to know that it's ever so important that we remember just who Paul is at this point in his life. You see, to understand the Philippians chapter 1 Paul, we must go all the way back to the book of Acts to see who Paul was before he was placed on this path. Acts 7 introduces Paul, then known as Saul, in a different light. He's introduced as a member of a party of Pharisee religious elites who would persecute the church of Christ. These persecutors would hunt down and even kill those who shared the teachings of Jesus. Acts chapter 8 verse 1 actually tells us that Paul approved of the stoning to death of a man named Stephen, one of Jesus' most devout followers at the time. Acts verse 8 and 3 says, "But Saul was ravaging the church, and entering house after house, he dragged off men and women and committed them to prison." Paul's life no doubt started as Saul, an enemy of God and his newly formed church. So then what changed? Paul experienced something that his decades of formal education and training in the law could never provide. He experienced the mercy of God and the magnitude of God's forgiveness in his life. This event is captured in Acts chapter 9, verse 9. "But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now as he went on this way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light shone from heaven around him. And falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, 'Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?' And he said, 'Who are you, Lord?' And he said, 'I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do.'" Paul experienced the love of Jesus, and this is enough to change even those who are furthest from God. In this moment that we know as the Damascus Road experience, Paul was not condemned for what he had done or who he was to this point, but he was embraced by Jesus and immediately certified to be a crucial part of God's mission. And this is where our story meets Paul's story, because just like Paul, we were once enemies of God by breaking God's law. But Jesus, through his crucifixion, has paved the way to the same mercy and forgiveness in our lives. Though Paul's road may have taken him on a few twists or turns that ours haven't to this point, all those roads lead back to Christ. The reason for Paul's boldness and faith can be said as easy as Paul said it himself in Romans 5:8. "But God showed his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Philippians 1:21 was a life creed that Paul found to overcome his circumstances and his fears to continue serving God until he would go on to be in the presence of his God. We can in fact then experience that same boldness in our Christian walk today, because it is God paving that way, and because fear, circumstance, not even death itself can defeat us as we walk in our God-given purpose. We just have to walk it. Hey, won't you join us this Sunday as we continue this sermon series, Fear, Faith, in Uncertain Times? Service kicks off at 10:30 a.m. Until then, God bless.